expound a little bit of what is that new thought pattern we're supposed to have. You know, and in 1 Peter 3, verse 8, it says, finally, all of you should be of one mind. Again, mind. There's it, the thoughts. You should be of one way of thinking. Thinking according to the way God wants us to think, instead of the way society or we're trained to think, or we're supposed, or our human mind, or human emotions, or human, you know, whatever's flowing through us believes that we should think. It says, sympathize with each other, love each other as brothers and sisters. So I've got a few points on some of these thought patterns we're supposed to have. And the first one is we're supposed to love each other. It says, love each other as brothers and sisters. If you flip back to Romans 12, where Paul continued to talk about this change of the way you think, it says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Mm-hmm. That's sometimes not a very easy thing to do. You know, some people, they don't make it easy for us to love them. I'll admit. There's some hard people to love. You know, there's that one person that just gets under your skin, and everything they say just kind of grits you the wrong way, and you know, it's like fingers on a chalkboard. You know, but Paul is saying here, remember, we're changing the way we think. Society says, ignore them, don't love them, you know, cast them aside. You know, hate them if you want. But it's saying here, don't just pretend to love others. So it's not even, we're not even supposed to just pretend to love them. We're actually supposed to love them. It says, really love them. In verse 10 it says, love each other with genuine, there's that word again, genuine affection. Genuine affection. It should come from your heart. And again, it's that process of changing the way we think. So instead of thinking hateful thoughts, instead of thinking, you know, I don't like that person, instead of thinking, you know, I just can't stand them, start training yourself. Change your thoughts about them. Start saying, you know what? I love you. I genuinely love you. It's coming from my heart. And reading on in 1 Peter 3, the next point says, be tender-hearted and keep a humble attitude. So number one, we love each other. Number two, we are to keep a humble attitude. That again, you know, these things are not easy things to do. So, you know, this is kind of a challenging message here. You know, we're to love each other, and we're to be humble. You know, C.S. Lewis says that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. You know, so humility, you know, a lot of people have a little bit of confusion about humility. We think, oh, you know, be humble, you're the meek person, you know. No. To be humble is just literally not thinking of yourself all the time, but thinking of others. You know, thinking of, you know, I'm going to have a humble attitude. You know, Paul the Apostle is a good example of, I believe, of humility. You know, I'm going to get a little soapbox here. But, you know, I watch a lot of television preachers, and you know, I'm always fascinated by that process of church growth, and you know, here you got a guy, and you know, all of a sudden he's this worldwide phenomenon. Always fascinated with that, and you kind of see, you know, there's this humble pastor of a church, and you know, opportunity strikes or whatever, you know, and you know, gets on television, and you know, pretty soon, you know, there's a bigger church, and then pretty soon there's you know, books, and there's television ministries, and, you know, then, so you have, you know, the beginnings, pretty much always, is a nice, humble beginning. And it seems like they go in the opposite direction. Instead of becoming, you know, you would think, more humble. You know, all of a sudden you've got the guys with the mics walking behind them, and instead of standing at the back door, you know, shaking hands with everybody, it's, you got to get past these guys before you can talk to the individual. You know, and then there's somebody to carry the briefcase, and, you know, then you buy the jet, or whatever. You know, it seems like you're going in the wrong direction here.
Did you see my jet over there?
You know, Paul in Galatians, you know, which was one of the first books Paul wrote, you know, he started it off by saying, Paul, the apostle, called not by men, but by God, by Christ. You know, he's like, I am the apostle. Respect me. You know, here I am. I'm Paul the apostle. You know, I had this traumatic experience on the road to Damascus. You know, it's not you that called me. Jesus called me. And he was so proud of that. And, you know, as he goes on his writing in 1 Corinthians, he says, you know, he said, Paul, the least of all the apostles. You know, here he is, continuing on his path, continuing on his journey. At first, he was the apostle. Now he says, I'm the least of all the apostles. You know, in Ephesians, a later letter, he said, Paul, I'm the least of all the saints. And then towards the end of his life, writing to Timothy, his protege, you know what he said about himself? He said, I am the chief of all sinners. So here's a man that went through a transformation in his life as he learned more and more about God. And instead of becoming this prouder person that you can't even touch or you can't even communicate with unless you get past the bodyguards or whatever, he went from being this great apostle to referring to himself as the least, the chief of all sinners. Because the more you understand, the closer you get to understanding what God is saying and that change he wants you to go through, the more you realize, who am I? You know, so the second point is in that transformation is that we are to be humble. And in Romans, back in our original text, it says, down in verse 16, it says, don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. I don't think you know it all. You know, sometimes we get to that point that, you know, pride comes in and it's like, well, I can't hang out with them because they're just, you know, they're not to my status level or they're not to my, you know, whatever. But Paul's saying, don't be too proud to enjoy the company. Enjoy the company of people you would consider ordinary. You know, none of us are really ordinary, but, you know, unfortunately sometimes we do. You know, consider people, but I don't think you know it all. You know, in James, it talks about, you know, if somebody comes into the church and you determine that they're, you know, you go to some churches and they've got the first few rows, you know, with the little chains on it, reserved for only the important people. You know, everybody been to a church like that? You know, you've got to sit in the back and the important people get the little blocked off section. You know, James says the opposite. He said the people you don't think are the important people, put them in the front seat. Put them in front. Give them the attention. You know, so a lot of times if you look at our society, if you look at the church, if you look at the way we act as Christians, you know, we're going in the opposite direction. We're more conforming to the patterns of the world. And we're allowing those thought patterns of our society to come in and influence how we act. You know, get on another soapbox. You know, you watch the you know, what's going on television and you see that pride and that, you know, we're this group, and unfortunately they you know, a lot of people claim to represent evangelical Christianity, and they're being hateful and they're being, you know, bigoted and they're being all of these things that you look and said, is that what Christianity is? Are you representing the faith? I don't think so, because we're to be humble. We're to love each other. And it says, don't repay, this is verse 9, sorry, I'm jumping up back and forth in 1 Peter 3. It says, don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. So my third point, be kind, be loving, be humble, and be peaceful. That's a toughie. Watching television, there's anything but peace. The society, and really the church, the evangelical Christians, or however you define people, they're not seeking peace. But if you read the Word, it says we're to be peaceful. In Romans 12, verse 16, it says, live in harmony with each other.